This week, we've heard the contention of UFO researchers that there's a secret government within our government. While that may be hard to believe coming from the UFO perspective, we've certainly learned in Watergate and the Iran-Contra scandal that factions within our government can and do pursue their own hidden agendas outside of the law, outside the control of Congress, or the knowledge of the American people.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
The live interview with the shadowy Dennis drew international attention. Portions were broadcast by radio in 6 European countries and in a nationally televised TV special in Japan.
Actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." He hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is by any standards fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
Right, this came from somewhere else. I mean, as bizarre as that is to believe, but I mean, it's there. I saw it. I know what the current state of the art is in physics, and it can't be done.
Checking out Lazar's credentials proved to be a difficult task. He says he earned degrees in physics and electronics, but the schools we contacted say they've never heard of him. He also said he worked as a physicist at Los Alamos National Lab, where he experimented with one of the world's largest particle beam accelerators, a half-mile-long behemoth capable of generating 700 million volts. Los Alamos officials told us they had no records of a Robert Lazar ever working there. They were either mistaken or were lying. A 1982 phone book from the lab lists Lazar right there among the other scientists and technicians. A 1982 clipping from the Los Alamos newspaper profiled Lazar and his interest in jet cars. It, too, mentioned his employment at the lab as a physicist. We called Los Alamos again. An exasperated official told us he still had no records on Lazar. EG&G, which is where Lazar says he was interviewed for the job at S4, also has no records. It's as if someone has made him disappear.
Well, they're trying to make me a non-person.
Explain. You called where?
Well, the schools that I went to, the hospital that I was born at, past job, and essentially nothing comes up with my name in it.
He smiles, but out of futility, knowing the whole thing must sound ridiculous.
I did not believe that this should be a security matter. Some of it, sure. But just the concept that there's definite proof, and we even have articles from another world, another system. You just can't not tell everyone.
George Knapp, Eyewitness News 8.
Are you Robert Scott Lazar? Yes. About whether you have lied about flying saucers or antimatter control, do you intend to answer my questions truthfully?
Yes.
Did you knowingly lie when you said that you had actually seen anti-gravity propulsion in operation?
No.
Did you knowingly lie when you said you had seen an antimatter reactor?
No.
Did you knowingly lie when you said that you actually saw a 30-odd foot gravity-powered flying disc?
No.
This is the hard part of the story for people to understand. It's they don't really get a sense of what it was like, because really, literally, you had to be there for some of this. I lived through it. I know what it was like, what Bob was going through at that time. They were breaking into his house and playing mind games. You know, they'd leave the doors open, they'd leave drawers open, nothing's taken. They'd write things on his blackboard or erase things, move things around. He goes to the gym with his buddy, and he's kind of scared, so he's got an Uzi in his car. He comes out an hour later after working out. The doors to the car are open, the windows are down, the glove box is open, and the Uzi is laying there on the front seat. That wasn't a burglary. That was somebody messing with him. That stuff really happened. It's both frightening and infuriating.
Do you, on a deeper level, trust Bob's story now than before?
What you take away from it 25 years later, after sitting down with Bob and hearing him tell this story with the same details. He's not adding any stuff to it. Doesn't have to worry about remembering the truth, because he remembers the same version, the same story, the same way, same details. And he's telling things that actually happened to him. I tend to, it carries a lot of weight with me. 25 years later, still telling the same story, reluctantly, by the way. This is a reluctant UFO messiah. The only reason he came out to talk to us again is because I bugged him about it relentlessly. Come on, Bob, when are you coming out? Are we there yet? Kind of and he finally relented and came out, but he wasn't happy about it. Nothing good comes from the UFO field for him. It does nothing but cause him trouble. If he had to do it over again, I suspect he wouldn't do it because it changed his life. And there was a part of him, as he said in our most recent conversation, there's a part of him that would really like to still be working on that stuff. I mean, it's really amazing technology. The most amazing technology he's ever seen. I think I believe the story more than I did before. The idea that Bob was a disinformation agent or part of a program to mislead the public is wrong. He's not. And I can say that after knowing the guy for a quarter of a century. The story he told then is the story he tells now. He didn't add to it. He's not making it more elaborate. He's not remembering new parts of it. It's the same story. It's consistent all the way through.
All right. Well, take it from the top then. I mean,
Okay. Well, go ahead.
how you got involved with this program?
I had sent resumes to several national labs around the country. I got a response from a couple of them. They said, we might have something in the near future you would be very interested in. You know, you say you work on little projects. I said, yeah, I have a particle accelerator in my master bedroom and things of that sort. And some time went by and they called me back in. They said there was a senior staff physicist that was leaving this organization, and they basically interviewed me for that job.
Okay, you're there on the first day. What happens on the first day?
First day was when I read most of the briefings.
121 of these things.
Right. I only
read them. What did they say?
through some reaction, it produces a gravity field that's not completely understood. One of the things that they were teaching me was the physics that connect all this together. To create fields and power such as these disks require to do what they do, to lift off the ground without a audio propulsion system, requires just a tremendous amount of energy, and this is the only way they could achieve it.
How does that work? I mean, does that field become useful?
It's the most potent energy source that there can be. Just as a rough guesstimate, a kilogram of antimatter is equal in energy to 47 10 megaton hydrogen bombs. It's an extremely potent energy source. It's a direct conversion of matter to energy.
If you want to tell the full story of John Lear, you have to cover the story of Bob Lazar. And the only way to do that is to talk to Bob. And I don't know if he'll talk to you or not, but you need to try. Well, it's all going to be circumstance for you. Is the moment that you approach him, the mood that he's in, what else is going on in his life at the time. You might hit the jackpot and get him at exactly the right time, and the universe is aligned and he's willing to talk about it. But you'd have to be awfully lucky. Because in general, Bob doesn't like to talk about it. I think he's very happy in his life. He's happy to have left the UFO stuff behind. He misses his friends. He misses John Lear. He misses Gene Huff, maybe even me to some extent. But he doesn't miss the UFO topic. And he doesn't miss talking about it because ultimately it's disturbing. These are disturbing issues. They go to the heart of who we are as people, as human beings, the nature of reality itself. Is this a computer simulation? Are we all the product of an alien video game or some multi-dimensional movie, drive-in movie theater production or something? Big questions, disturbing answers, and Bob has never been comfortable in talking about them, never.
You know, look, you can nitpick anything, you know, to the point where you find inconsistencies and then you can add those inconsistencies up and say, you know what, this can't be true. But the thing is, you can do that with factual events. And this was a factual event. Where the project is now, where the parts are now, you know, this is all 20 years ago. So I know there are alien craft here from another planet. I saw other ones, but I was inside one. I know it was not made on Earth. I know it was made with materials that we cannot fabricate, we cannot duplicate, and we've never been able to. I know it uses a power source that's so advanced that we could only dream of something along those lines, and the energy density on it is phenomenal. It's nothing that I would ever expect to see. I know that, you know, this is done in the highest levels of security, and, you know, that they use all kinds of methods to keep it quiet, from disinformation to, some exotic ways of just hiding things. Like I said, the installation itself was buried in the side of a mountain, and, you know, I also know that there's lots of nonsense information that has gone around, and whether it was started by the Navy or military or whoever's at the absolute bottom, you know, of the project. And I truly suspect that be the case because, look, disinformation is the most powerful, you know, way to distort facts. You just throw a bunch of useless stuff out there and, you know, they just take the real facts along with the nonsense and bundle it together and say, well, this is just impossible. And, you know, there, your security is maintained. But I also know that at some point they've examined or had bodies of alien creatures somewhere. So I know that stuff for a fact. And that's the bottom line.
Well, I am telling the truth. I've tried to prove that. What's going on up there could be the most important event in history. You're talking about contact, physical contact and proof from another system, another planet, another intelligence. That's got to be the biggest event in history, period.
And it's real.
And it's real and it's there.
Lazar says he has no intention of going on any UFO lecture circuit. He's not looking to do any additional interviews. In fact, he wasn't too crazy about doing this one. He did it after certain unfavorable things started happening in his life, and he did it because he feels that whoever is running the show up at S4 is perpetrating a fraud on the American people and on the scientific community.
But one of the investigators is still shaken by what he heard.
I was looking for all the little signs, the body language, if you will. There was tremendously positive eye contact. There was no fidgeting around, and he never deviated. We covered it several different ways. I asked the same question several different ways, and his answers were always the same. Hooking up, going through the test, then started the emotional roller coaster that I experienced that night. And it's something that I can honestly say has changed my whole outlook on things. We started the first test, and it went exactly the way I thought it might. He was not doing well. He was reacting to the relevant questions more than he was to the control type of questions, which is indicative of a person who is deceptive, because it's showing an emotion that he does not feel comfortable with his answers. These questions bother him. It was basically, have you ever observed a saucer-shaped craft fly out at Area 51? And that was asked, I think, 2 or 3 different times. The second chart we ran was on another question dealing with the gravity amplifier or an antimatter reactor as part of the powertrain. About halfway through that test, I'm looking down, and all of a sudden the realization sets in that I'm looking at a probable, truthful result. And I mean, I'm getting chills right now talking about it, because that's what I got. On every chart that I did, the one relevant question that was the same with every test was the last one. Have you deliberately lied to any question concerning the UFO information you've given me? And his answer of no was indicated as being truthful on the charts. So whatever he told me that night, Bob Lazar truly believes to be the truth.
In 1989, I met Robert Lazar, and the story he told me was an incredible one by any standards. I thought that if, in fact, any of this stuff checks out, it may be the biggest story in history. For myself and the TV station, the key to his credibility, the key to his story was always Los Alamos, because if he worked at Los Alamos, if he worked in classified projects, it is at least conceivable that he would have been brought to Nevada to work in other classified projects. As a test on his veracity, we wanted to go to Los Alamos and have him show us around. He said, I can get you in. That, yeah, we'll believe this when we see it. So we were there on a weekend. Fewer people are in the lab, and Bob, in fact, did take us in. And it was like following him through this labyrinth of different labs and facilities, and he knew his way around like a rabbit in its own burrow. He knew where everything was, and that impressed me, because how would he know if he hadn't been there? Los Alamos was uncooperative from the first day. Years and years went by, and I still couldn't get any confirmation from them that Bob had ever worked there. It makes no sense. They'd have no records on someone who worked there just a few years before, but that's what they were telling me. Now, I had interviewed other people that worked with Bob there who say that he was an employee, he was a physicist, and he worked in classified projects. If that were the case, where are the records? Because to this day, we still can't find them. What this tells me is that someone has tried to wipe out Bob's background so that fewer people will give him any credibility.
What we used to do is we used to drive to Los Alamos from here. It was a 16-hour drive, and Bob had a friend there, and it used to take us like 24 hours to rebuild all these Alpha Pros. There was like 300 of them, and we'd clean them all up and then rewire them and then put the aluminum tape on them, and then we drive back to Las Vegas.
What's an Alpha probe?
They scan for radiation of the people that go in and work in Los Alamos.
Oh.
And Bob had the contract. So we did that about every 6 weeks.
Uses a lens to focus a weapon of some sort, similar to the SDI device we were working on in the 80s, but with the potential of a focusing device using the gravity generator.
And Project Looking Glass?
Project Looking Glass dealt with the distortion, the fact that there's a time distortion, essentially looking back in time, and by that I do not mean looking back years ago to see the wagon train days. They're looking for distortions that are milliseconds in time, and what that was used for, I don't know, but that was just observing the time, the time distortion, time dilation phenomena of the craft in operation.
What is element 115? Is it found here on Earth, or is it strictly an extraterrestrial material?
115 is strictly an extraterrestrial material. It probably occurs naturally in some other places, maybe other star systems. You know, some people not familiar with science or chemistry say, well, that's ridiculous, all the elements occur on Earth, you know. But that's not true. And there are elements on the periodic chart that aren't found on Earth. I believe the Heavy Ion Research Lab in Darmstadt, Germany, has reached element 112 recently. So 115 isn't that far away. And when they synthesize it, it's not like they're making a couple ounces of it. They're talking about 1 or 2 atoms of it. To make any usable quantity of a heavy element like that is virtually impossible. Element 115 is in the top of the reactor. And the base of the reactor apparently is a small, something similar to a cyclotron. It's a particle accelerator. A particle is accelerated to high speed and then deflected up a small tube, and it's aimed at the 115. This transmutes the 115, similar to the way we do that in a normal particle accelerator. This causes a reaction, a radiation emission that we really haven't seen before. It produces antimatter. This antimatter is guided down a tuned tube and reacts with a gas. When matter and antimatter react, they convert to 100% energy. This energy is converted, heat energy, is converted to electrical power in the reactor itself. This is done through a thermoelectric converter. And this electrical power is used to power other subsystems on the craft, though there is no wiring, you know, as we would know it. Also, that's almost a byproduct of the reactor. The reactor also sets up a gravitational wave from the 115 being bombarded. This gravitational wave is present at the top of the reactor and is essentially guided in the same way microwaves are guided, through tuned tubes. And this goes to their amplifying cavities and through the projectors that are in the bottom of the craft.
With the gravity generators running, is there thermal radiation danger to the crew?
There is no thermal radiation while the reactor is running. The thermionic generator is 100% efficient, which is in violation of the first law of thermodynamics. But in fact, it works. Element 115 is stable. And for those familiar with chemistry, we know that elements with higher atomic numbers have shorter and shorter half-lives. However, when you reach a certain point, they call it the island of stability. There is a place, and we've theorized this for a long time, somewhere around 114 to 116, there should be an area in there where the nucleus of the atom is geometrically stable with protons and neutrons, where it no longer decays. It's not radioactive. 115 is, in fact, this element. In fact, it does occur again, somewhere around element 247. Of course, you know, we're nowhere near synthesizing that. We can only, you know, predict things like that, but that's where 115 is.
Did they, the aliens, give us element 115 in large quantities?
Whether or not it was given to us, I can't answer that question. However, I was told that we have 500 pounds by one of my coworkers. How it was obtained and, you know, where exactly it came from, I don't know. Whether it came in one of the crafts or, you know, it was separate cargo somewhere, you know, anyone can speculate, but I was told that was the figure.
You were able to get away with a sample of element 115. How much did you get away with?
No comment.
Test flights, unofficially, while off the base. What did you see?
The test flights I saw off the base, actually the best test flight was witnessed by my friends. who I had brought out there. At the exact moment the craft was hopping around and doing some really impressive maneuvers, I had turned around and I think was looking for the video camera or something to that effect, but I missed some of the most impressive maneuvers. But the craft was similar to what was done before that I had seen close up, other than the fact that it went above the mountain range, moved a much greater distance at a much higher rate of speed.
How were you able to find out about the test flight schedules?
The test flight schedules were told to me specifically because I was probably going to have to be present during those times. And at that time, the test flights were taking place on Wednesday nights. And from what they said, that was because that was statistically the least amount of traffic in the area. And that's all that they were concerned about.
Does the propulsion system release any sort of discharge or exhaust?
There was a high voltage discharge on the bottom of the craft, but as far as there being an exhaust, there was none.
Why do they appear as glowing balls of light in the night sky?
Well, that's kind of the same reason why a neon light or a fluorescent light lights up. What you're dealing with is a high energy source in essentially a gas atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen. And when you apply enough energy to a gas molecule, they emit photons, they emit light. And I don't think it's anything, it's really a byproduct of how the craft operates. When it's emitting that much energy, the gas surrounding the craft emits light. The same reason why lightning is visible. You have a huge electrical discharge, and the gas emits light in the form of lightning bolt. If you were going to see one of these crafts at night operating, it would appear really as a glowing ball or just a bright light in the sky from a distance. Even close up, you'd see a glowing halo around it. This is typically what you'd see in your normal UFO sighting, if you've heard them a lot. However, keep in mind that lights in the sky are caused by much more common things than flying saucers.
Tell us a little more about the aurora you witnessed taking off out of Area 51.
It was a large craft, and the one glimpse I got of it was from the rear, and it had two huge square exhausts with vanes in them. And it was just, it sounded more like a rocket than a jet. I don't know. I even think he did mention that it was liquid methane powered, but there again, you know, working on the disk technology, I really could care less what was rolling around at Area 51, but it did catch my eye.
As a result of going public, have there been any attempts made on your life?
One day when I was getting on Interstate 15, driving down Charleston Boulevard, a car came up alongside of me, and I thought he was just trying to race me to get on the freeway. This was after I had left the project. It was a white, boxy-looking car. Exactly what make and model, I don't know. But I accelerated to get on the freeway to go fast, and there was a gunshot, and the back of the car was hit, and I skidded off into the median. And I stopped, and I was frightened, and I just stood there because I thought the guy was going to be alongside of me and just shoot me. I had nothing to do. I was essentially paralyzed with fear, and I waited there, and then nothing else happened. And do I know it was a government agent trying to kill me? No. Could it have been a drive-by shooting? Maybe. You know, so it wasn't, I mean, it was an attempt on my life, but by who specifically, I don't know. Though I was threatened before I had left, that they threatened my wife's life and my life, so I can only put two and two together and say that they were kind of pissed at me.
In an earlier interview, you had mentioned that they had put a gun to your head. Tell us about that.
That was after we were caught out when I had the test flight schedule, and I brought some friends out to show them the disc test. We got caught out there, and the following day I was debriefed down at Indian Springs Air Force Base, and I was in the room with the security guards that caught us, my supervisor and some other people, and some of the security personnel Yeah, they were essentially grilling me about security and, how could I possibly bring people out there, and I guess I wasn't as responsive as they would like, and they got in my face, and one of them pulled a sidearm out.
When setting the periodic table, leave room for an extra element. Researchers in Sweden say they've made one by slamming together the atoms of calcium and americium. And it's a beast. Its atomic number is 115, much heavier than lead or uranium. Its temporary name is ununpentium, much harder to say than lead or uranium. But you can't see it. Right after the atoms collided, the element disappeared in a flash of radiation. You can't find it. It doesn't exist in nature. Swedish scientists can't say they invented it. Russian researchers first made this element in 2004. And you can't really do anything with it. They say it's just not practical. Some folks might be elementally confused about why we should care at all. Well, researchers say it did confirm that the 2004 study created a new element, even for just a moment. Scientists hope that one day, experiments like these could lead to the lasting creation of a new, usable element. And if ununpentium is approved by a committee combining members of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry and the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, say that 3 times fast, it could change the periodic table as we know it. Like everything on that chart, it's elementary. Carl Azus, CNN, Atlanta.